Lorne Michaels, the legendary creator of Saturday Night Live, has shaped television comedy for 50 years, becoming a key figure in entertainment, known for spotting lots of great talent. Our next guest interviewed Michaels, his friends, and so many of the stars and writers of SNL over the years. Susan Morrison is here. She's the author of Lorne, the man who invented Saturday Night Live, and we were just discussing the special that took place on Sunday night. You've been working on this project for a decade.
That's right, I have. I started in 2015, persuaded Lorne to get on board the next year, and I interviewed him about 50 times in his office and everybody in his big world, and then I had to sit down and do the hard part of writing it.
Okay, so here's my question to you, which is, in the context of business, we all talk about him as a great producer and all of that. But I think that he is one of the great either talent spotters or talent molders or talent something. And he seems to have a sort of very good hand when it comes to finding the right people.
Yes.
What is that about?
Did he find the right people to find the right people? Or was he at whenever a groundling or a Second City person came in and did an audition, was Lorne there to decide, or did he have? He had talent people.
He's always the final decider. He has wranglers who bring in the right people. They kind of pre-pick, but he's always the final decider. In the same way, he's the final decider Saturday night with what's in and out of the show.
Right.
That said, he's great at picking the people, and he's great at delegating. I think that's the key to why he's been able to do it for 50 years.
He's also fearless, not worried about what his bosses want to do, cool under pressure.
Right.
He's a loyal, great guy, too.
Well, another thing about live television that plays to his strengths, one of his longest-term employees, Jim Downey, who was the head writer for 30 years, puts it this way. He says, Lorne is a guy who's not so great at term papers, but great at tests. In other words, you know, his superpower is the deadline.
Deadline.
It's because they're going on at 11:30. The thing can be in tatters at 10:30. And that's the moment he gets up there after dress rehearsal and talks to his staff and goes, cut this, change that, move this all around.
I want to know, though, about how you think he's... And I don't know if you think it's purposeful, the culture he developed, but when you listen to, and I was crying like a baby when Adam Sandler was singing that song.
No, you're the only person in the world that was crying.
I was crying like a baby because it spoke to me about the culture that this man had created, and for everybody who was sitting in that audience, who really were the people who used to be on the stage, they felt it. You could see how they felt every word of what Adam was talking about when he said, you know, they'd wake up on Sunday afternoon and be depressed, and there was but all of the sort of aspects of it, they all had this shared collective thing. And I think that's something that he must have created for them.
Well, I think that the biggest contribution, besides determining what generations of Americans find funny, which is pretty huge, is that he's built a culture with walls around it. You know, he's got generations of talent who are very loyal to him, as if he's the Godfather, you know, and they are.
But so what's that about? How did he do that?
Well, if you think about it, he took these people when they were very young. Like, let's say you're 22 years old, you're from Oklahoma, you know nothing. This guy is giving you a pretty good salary. He's opening the world to you. He's suddenly giving you, you know, Sulka pajamas and telling you where to eat in New York City and how to buy an apartment, and also giving you kind of the keys to the comedy kingdom. He's a man with a lot of axioms. I mean, there were times when I thought I could rewrite this book as like a Harvard Business School management guide. Right. He has, you know, like 15 points of how to do this and how to do that. And
what would be the top three?
Well, in terms of comedy, I'd say one is do it in sunshine, which means that you always have to remember that comedy is an entertainment. People watch TV like they're huddled around a fire. They want to be kind of lifted up. Lifestyle one, maybe, is buy a more expensive apartment than you think you can afford.
Right.
Because then at the end of the day, you'll come home and you'll say, who lives here? You know, I live here. You know, he was kind of decades ahead of everybody else in terms of life-work balance. You know,
sounds like there was no balance.
If you took every major talent discovered on Saturday Night Live and removed it from the landscape over the last 50 years, that's when you realize what Lorne Michaels accomplished. And I don't have time to mention all of them. I mean, Eddie Murphy, Bill Murray, the biggest. Mike Myers was both Austin Powers.
I know.
And who was the other guy?
Wayne's World.
Wayne's World,
of course.
Dana Carvey, just go on and on. Current stars, Will Ferrell, wherever you want to go. There must be 30 or 40 of them. And that's not including people from that I remember, like Jane Curtin, who went on to amazing. And I forget some of them.
But that's what I'm trying to get at.
Chris Farley.
So it feels
Chris
like
Farley died
so when we look at it, the hit rate is so high. However, interestingly, two things are going on. So this is what I'm very curious about. First of all, it became at some point.
Belushi.
It became a magnet for talent, meaning there wasn't a million places for everybody to go.
Maybe that's it.
So that's one thing that I think about a little bit. And this is not to discredit what he's done, but at some point he created such a great mousetrap that all of a sudden you get a first look at all of the best talent.
Yes.
And then the other question is, how there's probably, I imagine, a lot of folks that we don't talk about anymore.
Yeah, probably fewer than you think, but there are definitely people who just come, they do a one-year tour of duty, and then they're out. Some of them recover. Some of them live their whole lives
but even
feeling like they missed their
second, third,
shot.
fourth tier, the guy who plays Barry, I can't even remember his name.
Bill Hader? Oh,
Will Hader. Come on.
He's first tier.
He's first tier.
Okay, Will Ford, Will Forte, who was in Nebraska. Or
tell us about Lorne's business empire itself, which is to say, we keep talking about Saturday Night Live, but really Broadway video and all of the tentacles that touches. I can't tell you how many films I've seen where he is an executive producer or he touches it in some other way.
After the first 5 years, he left the show and thinking that he thought he was going to become a movie director. And it was his Michael Nichols period. And then right around that time, his friend Buck Henry said, "So, Lorne, what was your takeaway? What was your cut? What'd you get out of this 5 years?" And he said, nothing. Like he had negotiated no ownership, like no anything. And he kind of thought, gee whiz, So when he came back to the show 5 years later, he was just a lot smarter as a businessman, and he had various advisors and lawyers along the way. He said in the last 40 years, there were a whole series of renegotiations of him clawing back different kinds of distribution rights and foreign sales rights and things, and that would change every few years depending on the health of the show. And so that in the end, he was owning a big chunk of it. And 10 years ago, during the 40th anniversary, Comcast approached him, bought back a big chunk of it, and left him with a big chunk of change. So he's a very rich man.
He was an in-office guy, too, in a suit.
Always.
Yeah.
He was not doing any remote work on a Zoom.
Right. During COVID, when they produced the show remotely, he was locked down in St. Bart's. And his team did most of everything from New York. He didn't want to become a Zoom guy, so he just did all conference calls.